About half of you should recognize this. The men should recognize this if you need some help. It's obviously a urinal. And more importantly, there's a fly in the urinal. And I'll get back in a minute to why that's important. But first, I want to talk about why this is my favorite example of behavior change, and why behavior change is such an important topic right now. There are three different kinds of behavior change according to a textbook that I read when I was in college in a political science class. Textbooks never lie, right? So I'm going to talk about those briefly. The first is laws. Laws can change our behavior. We're obeying laws right now, rules, regulations. In New York City in 2003, they banned smoking in all the bars and the clubs and the restaurants and the cafes, as you can see. And as a result, people had to change their behavior around that. We're also motivated by money, whether we want more money or we need more money, a variety of reasons why we're motivated by money. Speaking of cigarettes, as taxes on cigarettes go up, cigarette sales go down, especially for people who don't have a lot of money and can't spend money on cigarettes. And we're also motivated by emotion, whether it's fear or desire. Think about your reaction to this if you're a smoker and Marlboro is now selling a carton of cigarettes that looks like this. You might respond differently than just buying the cigarettes, but if you're addicted, diehard smoker, it might be fine. But some people respond to emotion in these ways. There's a fourth way that we can be motivated to change our behavior, and that's through environment. I came across this more recently in the past year, and it brings us back to our urinal with the fly in it. This little fly was used in Holland in, I think it was about 15 years ago is when it was introduced, in the urinals in order to help men aim at the urinals. So if you, for those of you who don't spend a lot of time in men's urinals, they can get, or in, not urinals, in bathrooms, they can be a little disgusting at times. And that was the problem at the airport. And so after putting this fly, it's actually etching in the urinal. Spillage rates decreased by 80%. Immediate results were made by that. Such an amazing, simple idea, simple graphic, strategically placed in the urinal, forces men to aim. It's pretty great. So obviously, graphics in that location can, cause your behavior to change. But what does the environment have to do with that? For that, I'm going to rely on some research from two behavioral psychologists, Wendy Woods and David Neal. They study habits and how habits form and the nature of our habits. According to them, 45% of our actions take place in the same places every day. So we work, we have a house, we travel to work probably, do a lot of things, but in those locations, we perform a series of actions, and those series of actions come together to form our habits. And so the fact that we're located in these different places and repeat these actions help us form behaviors. So in this instance, one of my habits is to open the refrigerator, and of course Nutella's in there. It's staring me down. And so I grab that and I make myself a little sandwich. And by the way, I know Nutella is not supposed to be kept in the refrigerator, but we keep a lot of things in the refrigerator we probably shouldn't. So, but Wendy Woods and David Neal talk about us being integrated into our environment in this way. So we kind of respond like sheep to prompts that we get in our environment. And as a result, I'm not going to go there just yet. As a result, we, have a variety of bad habits or actions with bad consequences. So in order to break these bad habits or unwanted behaviors, they suggest that we figure out what that environment is, how we're acting in that environment, and figure out some way to disrupt that series of actions that forms a habit. So thinking back to our example of the urinal, from the time when men enter the bathroom to when they exit it, typically, there's a variety of things that take place during that time. But that fly disrupts the way people experience the bathroom as they normally would, especially when you're in an airport and you're moving quickly through an airport and you're not thinking about being clean necessarily. So if we're to summarize the ideas of Woods and Neal into a formula, because we love formulas, they help us figure out how to act, it might look like this. First of all, identify whatever habit or behavior you want to change. It might look like this. First of all, identify whatever habit or behavior you want to change. At that point, ask yourself whether or not environment plays any role or factor into that action. And then lastly, find some way to disrupt that. I talked about graphics. It can be auditory. It can be, depending on your medium, it can be a variety of things. So I always like testing formulas, as I'm sure most of you do. And there's a building pretty close to where I live that I like to go to the coffee shop at. And it's in this big commercial building. It's got a lot of doors and entryways. And it always has the option of using either revolving doors or the swinging doors. And I noticed that a lot of people really weren't using the revolving doors. And so I took this chance to think about how I can disrupt that behavior, how I can get people to start thinking about using the revolving doors. And again, this is thinking like a kid. We don't think twice about it because we're used to it, but I think it really takes a childlike mentality to step back and say, how could things be different? So I did a little bit of research. I found that these buildings in the United States, these large commercial buildings, typically the ones that have revolving doors, use about 19% of the total energy in the country, which amounts to about $180 billion a year. There's a lot of reasons why these buildings use energy and how they use energy. In the case of door use, especially when swinging doors are opened, there's a free exchange of air that happens, which doesn't happen with revolving doors. In fact, 8 times more air is exchanged when a swinging door is used than when a revolving door is used. So when you do some calculations, this can be in the thousands of dollars a year. In larger buildings, it's more. There's one MIT study I saw which estimated up to $8,000 for one of the buildings that they had done a study on. So I was thinking about how I can manipulate this, and I did myself a little tour, walked around Midtown Manhattan, where a lot of these large commercial buildings with revolving doors happen to be. And there are a lot of them. I visited about 56, 57 buildings and watched the activities that people have when they're given the option of using one or the other door. It turns out that about 27% of people use the revolving doors. So in other words, 63% of people use swinging doors, quite a large percentage. But these buildings also have their lineage, can trace their lineage back to one guy in Philadelphia in 1888 who got a patent for his revolving door idea. Theo von Cannell is his name. And his idea was to create these revolving doors that were noiseless as they go around, that would prevent noise from coming in from the street, that could prevent any wind. Of course, it's a big deal. Any wind, any dust, any rain, any snow, any of those things from coming into the building. And then also, in a rather genius way, help people not collide with each other when they're coming in and out of the building. So obviously, revolving doors allow more than one person to go through a door. So it's an ingenious invention when you think about it. We take it for granted now, but quite amazing back in the day. So after I did all my research, a little bit more research, I was curious about why people don't use revolving doors. There's a lot of really friendly doormen out there who love opening doors for people, having a conversation, helping people out. But that same MIT study that I quoted earlier mentioned that people often feel cramped in these doors. They feel like they might get hurt, or they just feel a little unsafe. And as a result, they use swinging doors, which are much easier. And of course, I should point out that swinging doors are essential for anybody who has a disability and needs to use it, and for anybody who's moving large equipment through or into or out of the building. But I chose to do a little study back at the building that I go to a lot. I thought about the signage. There really wasn't much signage. And as a graphic designer, I think a lot about the signs and how we interact with them. And so I thought, let's do a series of tests and see how signs help people and what we can figure out in terms of the most optimal sign. The first one is really crude. This is just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, very simple text, and I taped it on the corners to the door so that it would look kind of like a freshman did it, you know? So before people were using this, before I put this up, people were using the swinging doors about 62% of the time, very similar to the other sets. 62% of the time. Afterwards, people were using revolving doors 27% of the time. So it's a really big increase in the number of people who were using it. The second sign that I made was directional. I wanted to sort of point people towards the revolving door. This one's actually a little bit smaller in width and a little bit shorter as well. And it turns out only 53% of people use the doors as a result of this. But this told me that, first of all, that signs were working, that people were responding to them. But second of all, that the size is important. People need to be able to see the sign and then interpret it and then have enough time to act on it. A lot of times people were walking right up to the door and then reading it. Sometimes people just went right through it because they've already made all that effort. So my third sign was bigger and better, of course. 2 feet long, 8 inches high. The text is a lot larger, and it also incorporates the branding colors of the building, which is this dark blue color. And again, it's pointing towards the revolving door. So I had really good results with this, I'm happy to say. 70% of people who had the option of using both doors chose the revolving door. So this is a much better example of the kind of sign that was important. I have to admit, at one point I was thinking about wrapping the whole door in a sign and seeing what the response would be there. But don't really have the resources for that, and also I felt like I might get kicked out of using the building. So picking my battles. But this clearly shows that people respond to these kinds of cues. The habit of walking into a door was completely disrupted for most of the people who came across this. So finding ways to change behaviors can be done in this way. And moving forward, as you think about how you want to change a behavior, or if you want to make a change in your community, I encourage you to just look around. They're everywhere. Change possibilities are everywhere. You don't have to have a lot of materials. You don't have to have a lot of expertise. It always helps if you can partner with people who can do things better than you and find ways to do things more efficiently. But think about behavior and think about the way that people act in communities and act in environments. At that point, you'll have a much better idea of how to approach the problem and make an impact. Thanks.